Good morning, members. It is now time to start the meeting. We have also formed a quorum, so I call the meeting to order. So this is the first meeting of the Establishment Subcommittee for the new term of the Legislative Council. There's one paper from the administration, EC 2016-17-19, and before that, let's deal with one paper that's been circulated to us, and that is EC1 2016-17-9, and that sets out the latest changes in directorate establishment approved since 2004. Let me remind members, if you have got direct or indirect pecuniary interest in relation to the matters before us today, in relation to our ROP, please disclose the nature of your interest in accordance with Rule 834A, and then please also note the requirements concerning declaration of pecuniary interest under Rule 824. Now, there is a paper from the Environmental Protection Department. The proposal is to create a supernumerary post of Principal Environmental Protection Officer D1 in the EPD with immediate effect upon approval by the Finance Committee up to 31st of March 2019 to lead the Food Waste Management Group for implementing the strategies as set out in the Food Waste Plan. On the 24th of this month, the EA panel has been briefed and consulted. In attendance, we have the Deputy Director of Environmental Protection, Ms. Kwok, and also AD of the EPD, Nature Conservation and Infrastructure Planning, Mr. Au. Ms. Chen is here. So, Ms. Tanya Chen, please, on behalf of the EAP, in the capacity of the chair of the panel, please brief us on your deliberation. Thank you, Chair. The EAP, on the 24th of October, the panel had a discussion. We do not object to the submission of the paper to the ESC. Ms. Tommy Cheung said that since it was not sure as to whether they could support the food waste plan, so the Liberal Party might not be supporting the paper. They would like to focus on source reduction of food waste. They weren't too sure about the duties. In the course of deliberation, questions were put to the administration in relation to the organic waste treatment facility, and we were also concerned about the launching of the waste reduction scheme among housing estates. In light of that, the administration has come back with a paper, and that's in relation to the transport, or rather traffic impact assessment, as well as the landfill arrangements in Tuen Mun. Thank you, Ms. Chen. Yip Kian Yuan, Wu Jiwei, Pan Xiaoping, and Ray Chen would like to speak according to that order. Sorry, Mr. Yip won't be asking questions. Who else? Then Dr. Yu would also like to ask questions. Thank you. And Mr. Wong Ten Kwong? 5 or 6 members of 5 only. 5 would like to ask questions. Who else? All right, 5 minutes each, please. Mr. Wu first. Thank you, Chair. Of course, we're concerned about food waste, and food waste has accounted for a large component of the refuse at the landfill. So it is important to recycle the food waste. Understand that for phase 1 of the food waste treatment facility, it will be focusing on the food waste from the commercial and industrial sector. Well, we know that food waste has a value. As you know, that it doesn't carry a lot of value, and therefore you need to pay for the collection. So I think it will be simpler. But then for domestic food waste, it is not as simple as that. Now, of course, we are told that we are invited to create a supernumerary post. Are we going to adopt a two-pronged approach? will the government be beefing up the strategy to recycle the domestic food waste? I think it will go a long way towards making the charging scheme successful. So do you have a strategy? Do you have a plan or timetable for the collection and recycling of domestic food waste? Can this supernumerary post holder prepare for that program so as to prepare for the future charging scheme for municipal solid waste? Didi. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Wu, for your question. Well, I think Mr. Wu is right to say that as far as the organic waste treatment facility is concerned, for phase 1, it will mainly be handling the food waste rising from the commercial industrial sectors. As we have pointed out earlier, and in fact, it has also been pointed out in the paper, we have got a food waste plan promulgated in 2014. We are now gradually implementing the food waste plan. We need to have 5 to 6 facilities in the network. Yes, I know the details. What about domestic food waste? Will the post holder be responsible for that? Can he come up with a strategy and a timetable in the short run? Indeed. This colleague will be responsible for food waste from the C&I sectors as well as preparatory work for the domestic food waste. Well, in fact, we have been using our funds to subsidize a lot of programs. I have to interrupt you, sorry. I really want to know if you have got specific targets or objectives. Now, if the post holder is to focus on the C&I sector food waste, it is too simple a job. Well, in fact, for the food and waste from the C&I sectors, there is a value, and people pay for the collection of the food waste. So probably, to me, I think that the post holder should also focus on domestic food waste. Will there be a timetable? Otherwise, it is not worth creating the post. In 2017, we are going to start a study on the collection, transportation, and disposal of food waste, covering domestic food waste as well. We are going to commence the survey or the study in 2017 ASAP. And in fact, we have already accumulated some experience with the domestic food waste in our pilot scheme or the experience in the transportation of commercial food waste. So we hope to build a very efficient and effective collection network. I've got a very specific question, but she's dodging the issue. What about the duties of this officer? What is the split between commercial and domestic food waste? 6-4 or what? Have you have you laid down an objective? Well, for this officer, most of his time will be focused on the preparatory work for the OWTF Phase 1. He will also dedicate time to talk about separation of food waste, and there will be a consultancy study. And in fact, we have got the specific details. We have already selected a consultant, so the study will soon commence. Once we have got any progress, in due course, we'll come back to share the information with you. Mr. Poon, you want to have a second round? Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I support the creation of this post, but then I've got 2 questions. First of all, for this supernumerary post, it will be up to the 31st of March 2019. But then when I read your paper, well, in fact, the food waste plan, for the time being, it will run from 2014 up to 2022. So for this supernumerary post, I want to know why you are not asking for longer duration. And then paragraph 9 of your paper, it is said that in 2014, the food waste plan was issued in 2014, and you have been redeploying your manpower and you have created 8 non-directorate posts, 5 permanent and 3 time-limited. Now you're going to create a directorate post to launch the scheme. I want to know whether you're still having 8 non-directorate posts supporting him. What about the 3 time-limited posts? Will they become permanent non-directorate posts? Didi, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Poon, for your question. In 2014, we set up the Food Waste Management Group. It was an urgent task, and that's why we did so through redeployment of manpower. And we have been redeploying a PEPO from the CBD, the cross-boundary division. Now, we would like to have the post up to 2019. March 31st. Of course, we need long-term manpower support. However, for the food waste plan, in the light of our different strategies, like the launching of the the municipal solid waste charging scheme, we will be reviewing the need and the duties of the food waste management group. When it's found to be necessary, we'll come back to get sufficient manpower to support the food waste management group. Mr. Poon referred to the support staff members in the group. There will be 8 more non-directorate posts. They will continue to support the work of the food waste management group. In other words, you think that 8 will be enough. In other words, you are not going to increase the manpower, right? My main point is you have got 3 time-limited posts, non-directorate ones. Are you going to change them into permanent posts? We'll continue to review the work. If necessary, we will be moving in this direction and apply for the conversion. Thank you. Next, Mr. Ray Chen. Thank you, Chair. Well, for the people power, as to whether we support or we have been supporting the work of the EPD, is all dependent on the determination of the administration to impose mandatory separation of waste at source. For the paper on the 24th of October, in paragraph 14, it is said that for food waste in Hong Kong, we have to impose mandatory separation of source, and the government would also consider the introduction of such a plan, and there will be preparation for the legislation. The Secretary answered my question at that time. Today, I would like to see if more information would be forthcoming. However, this piece of information is absent in this paper. There's no mention about a study concerning mandatory source separation. So is the government stepping back or what? And please tell us whether the officer involved will be studying that matter as well. Didi, thank you, Chair. Indeed, it is right that both in our paper last time and in the Secretary's remarks at the EAP panel meeting, that for the long term we need to learn from the experience of overseas countries. That is, we need the support of other policies. In the future, if necessary, we have to step up our efforts so as to promote the recycling of food waste. For the mandatory source separation of food waste, indeed, it is one of the directions. We are prepared and we do plan to do this, to explore the feasibility of mandatory source separation of food waste. Once the OWTF has commenced, we will find out whether it is necessary to have that support.
And we're also going to consider the effectiveness of the municipal solid waste charging scheme, which will be implemented in the future. And for the new post created, he will also be leading our other colleagues to commence a study in this regard. And this is also one of the tasks to be taken up by this Principal Environmental Protection Officer. I thank the government for considering the study in this regard. I look forward to your supplementary information, because otherwise, if we endorse this item, we'll be asking you to give another undertaking at the Finance Committee. Unless you have a separate voting at that stage. So can I have some supplementary information on mandatory separation of waste? Another point is that it says here that this is to tie in with this is to meet the need of in the medium term, and I think if we are to introduce a mandatory scheme on waste separation, the public sector will be taking the lead. But I understand definitely for the commercial sector, there will be repercussions. And Mr. Tommy Zhang at the panel meeting already raised his objection. I think we have yet to reach the legislative stage. I think the government should show some commitment, because definitely you will face opposition from the sectors concerned, just like the plastic shopping bag levy, which affects their operational costs. So I think that apart from considering the comments and views of the relevant sectors, the government should also show some commitment. This is my comment. Next, Mr. Edward Yu. Thank you, Chairman. 3 questions. 1. Now, about the creation of this D1 post, I want to know whether there are any relevant academic qualifications and experience requirements. If not, what about the other 8 non-directorate posts underneath this post? Any professional or academic requirements so as to make sure that the scheme would be implemented effectively? And then afterwards, I want to know whether there are KPIs to gauge the work of the principal officer. And in paragraph 16, I can see that as of the 1st of November 2016, you already have 9 supernumerary posts, directorate posts. And with this new post, there will altogether be 10 supernumerary directorate posts. I wonder if there will be too many such posts. And is there a timetable or an indicator to address the issue? And also, over the past 10 years, the figure has gone up by 50%. That is rank A. For rank B, that is those earning MPS point 33 or above. The increase was 31%. As for C rank, the growth was just 0.4%. That is those earning MPS point 33 or below. So I want to know whether you're expanding the higher echelon of the department, but shrinking, or that the growth of the lower echelon is much slower. Let me take your question on supernumerary directorate posts, and then my colleague will supplement on the academic and other qualifications requirements of the post. Indeed, we have 9 supernumerary directorate posts at the moment, but this is because there is a need for administrative reasons and also policy formulation. In fact, the FC already approved posts on implementing the schemes, including the charging scheme. Is it time limited? Yes, it is time limited. And because that colleague is in fact on pre-retirement leave, the supernumerary post is for the for administrative arrangement to stand in for the officer. Well, let me take Mr. Yu's other two questions on academic qualifications requirement. Basically, the PEPO will be taken up by a staff member who is very experienced, and he will be deployed internally, because an EPD officer would need to acquire experience and attain academic qualifications requirements before he can become an EPD officer. And this officer is very experienced in the field of environmental protection, including environmental science and engineering. And he has a doctorate degree and a bachelor's degree, and he also has the relevant experience in the field of environmental protection. For the Chief Environmental Protection Officer, one must first become the senior EP officer, and that means years of experience in this post. Now, for example, for the organic waste treatment facilities phase 1, we plan to commence its operation in the next quarter, and we expect tendering process to commence by the end of this year or early next year. As for phase 3 of organic waste facility treatment center, we will commence the study as soon as possible, and also the longer term study on the mandatory separation of waste. Again, we're going to conduct that as soon as possible. What about ranks B and C? Any plan to expand their sizes? Well, this will be based on need. If we will keep in view, we'll follow the procedures if there's a need to expand the ranks. Do you have a timetable? We have a regular review exercise on our establishment. We will review in a comprehensive manner manpower deployment of the department. Mr. Wong Ting Kwong. Thank you, Madam Chair. The DAB supports the creation of this post. Food waste is one crucial element in the work of environmental protection, and I also wonder why this is a time-limited supernumerary post, because food waste is a long-term task. So I wonder why only a supernumerary post is created. And I think the majority of food waste is generated from the catering industry. So we need to tackle the problem at source by having education and publicity to discourage people from ordering too much and letting food go to waste. So I want to know whether the government will step up their public education, because I think it is very important. Second point, on the matter of food waste, I'm concerned about the possible increase in business costs, because I think it would affect the sector very significantly. Third point, turning waste into energy. Well, with the commencement of the operation of the organic waste treatment facilities, I want to know more about the idea of turning waste into something useful. Thank you, Mr. Wong, for your question. As I mentioned just now, we're now applying to create a time-limited supernumerary post. But in the long term, we will keep in view our manpower situation, and if necessary, we'll create a permanent post to support work in this regard. About the Foodwise Hong Kong campaign, we'd like to raise the public's awareness on reducing food waste. And in fact, in February 2013, we launched the Foodwise Hong Kong campaign to reduce food waste territory-wide. So we're working together with the domestic households and the commercial and industrial sector in this regard. Earlier at the EP panel, we already mentioned, or the EA panel, we already mentioned that according to the latest statistics, we have seen some results as a result of enhanced public education brought about by the campaign. And in 2015, the figure has dropped by 7.1% comparing to 2014. And comparing to the baseline year of 2011, the figures dropped by 5.6%. Per capita, food waste also dropped. So that shows the joint effort made by the government and the community has borne fruit. And responding to Mr. Wong Ting Kwong's question on increased costs for the sector, because in the long run, we're going to impose the MSW charging scheme. So be it the general public or the C&I sectors, there is a greater incentive for them to recycle food waste, and we're preparing for the long term for them, so that in the long run, we can reduce the cost of food waste disposal of the sectors, and it will also enhance the image of the sectors, because many patrons nowadays are more environmentally conscious, and this will help attract these patrons. Well, Hong Kong is not like other agricultural countries such as the mainland, where food waste can be turned into fertilizers. Because we do not have agricultural or husbandry activities, food waste can only go to waste in Hong Kong. So I want to know whether there is any study on turning food waste into animal feed. In fact, for the 2014 food waste plan, we have taken into account the fact that Hong Kong does not have an agricultural base, and we cannot therefore absorb the food waste generated. But at the same time, the organic waste treatment facilities would turn food waste into 14 million kilowatt hours of electricity, benefiting 3,000 households. So in a way, the waste can be turned into something useful, and that's our policy. And food waste can also be turned into other useful materials such as additives. Dr. Lo Wai Kwok. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's still fresh in our mind, our childhood experience. I was in a primary school. I was living in To Kwa Wan, Kowloon City, in a tenement building where several households share a flat. And we had this bucket for food waste, and the bucket would be collected every day by an operator, and the waste would be used to feed pigs, so it would not go to waste. Many years ago, I also visited Korea, and I recall back then in Seoul, the old Chinese name was still being used, and nearby they had this village with treatment facilities. Some of the food waste collected would be turned into animal feed. Some would be turned into energy. Of course, that was what happened when I was a child. We no longer rear pigs in Hong Kong. We no longer have pig farms. But throughout the years, the government has totally ignored the problem of food waste, and that is why we have 1 million tons of, 10,000 tons of municipal solid waste disposed at the landfill, 1/3 of which is food waste.
Now we're going to get the first OWTF, but then it's still being constructed at Siu Ho Wan, but still it can only handle 200 tons per day. Now, it is said that we should step up the manpower allocation for food waste. No one will object to that. It is odd to see that we haven't got a request from the administration to create a permanent post for this PEPO to head the FWMG. It would only want to have it up to 31st of March 2019. Don't forget that after DSC, you still have to go to FC. In other words, it will only get about 2 years' time for this post upon getting approval from the FC. I don't understand why you seem to say that we only need to post for 2 years. We'll expect it to be needed for longer term, while sometimes to ask for longer term than it is needed. Now for the Xiuhou Wan facility, it will soon be completed. Probably the post holder can see the commissioning of the OWTF. But what about phase 2, phase 3, and the longer term job of food waste reduction? I don't think we can sort of finish the task in as short a period of time as 2 years. If you today convert it into a permanent post, I think everybody would support the idea. Ms. Kwok, you have only got a minute or so left. Thank you, Dr. Low, for your support. Indeed, we need long-term manpower resources. Of course, we will revisit the topic. If we need extra manpower resources for the FWMG, we'll go through the regular process, the routine process to ask for the resources. If necessary, we'll come back to get the support of the LegCo. Madam Chair, for the FWMG, they have got also permanent staff. But what about the PEPO? I'm sure the officer would be, the post will be needed on a long-term basis. If you say that it should be a permanent post, I will be more than happy to support it. It will last until for the 1st of March 2019. In other words, you have to come back to this, to the LegCo, and to ask for it to be approved once more. So you'll just be repeating the process. Would you like to tell us, Didi, whether it is something like creating the post for a specific candidate, like tailor-making it? No, that's not the case. We thank your support for the group. It is needed for the long term. We've also got Mr. Ao as the AD overseeing the work of the management group. For manpower resources, of course, we will re-examine the need, and if necessary, we will ask for the resources as soon as possible and ask for your support. Well, Madam Chair, let's have it approved as soon as possible. Don't ask for it to be voted on separately at the FC meeting. Thank you. Mr. Yu. For the proposal, I do support the creation of this post. As my colleagues have said, I think it's better to create a permanent post than to have a supernumerary post lasting for 2 years or so. A question on paragraph 6. Domestic food waste as well as food waste from the commercial and industrial sectors. We have been given the rate of reduction in both sectors. Can you sort of give us more details? Mr. Ao. Yes, we do have the ratio. Generally speaking, domestic food waste takes up 2/3 of the food waste in Hong Kong, the remaining 1/3 taken up by the commercial and industrial sectors. Now it is said that for the C&I sectors, the reduction rate is lower, just 4.6%. You also admit that when it comes to the food waste in C&I sectors, it depends on the vibrancy of the food and beverage sectors. In 2015, we saw a fall in the business in that sector. So would you like to sort of take into account the fall in business in the catering and hotel sectors so as to adjust the figure of 4.6%? Who will take up this question? Mr. Au. Madam Chair, let me try to answer this question. When compared with 2014, there was a slight fall in the number of visitors in 2015, and this will also be reflected in the fluctuation in the level of food waste in the commercial and industrial sector. But still, for those sectors, the food waste has been reduced by 4.6%. In other words, you haven't got what I'm asking for. In 2015, there was a fall in the business of the tourism industry and the catering industry. So you are not able to adjust the figure to come up with a lower one than 4.6%. In 2015, the food waste generation was lower than that outlined in the resource blueprint. At that time, the figure was 5%, so we have seen results. Well, for the food waste in the commercial and industrial sectors, we do hope that there will be some success. Now, for the domestic food waste, yes, the fall has been notable, but are you going to strive for a higher reduction rate? Well, we'd like to see a fall of 5 to 10% in terms of food waste. We've seen improvements in domestic as well as the commercial industrial sectors. For the C&I sector, we've got the Food-Wise Eateries campaign. We have got many eateries joining it, 260. And we're also encouraging the consumers to take away their leftover food. So we've been improving the efforts. Now you are going to create a new post, so you must try to do better. So you need to have an objective, a target. Otherwise, there's no point of creating the post. Mr. Au. Now, upon completion of phase 1 of the OWTF, we would then be able to serve the C&I sectors. We can cover 200 tons of food waste from those sectors. And then we will be tendering for phase 2 of the OWTF. When we get the funding, then we hope that we can have the second phase having a capacity of 300 tons. In other words, 500 in total. In other words, we can handle all the food waste from the C&I sectors. So we hope that the C&I sectors can send the food waste to the OWTF. The total generation will be 1,000. So if we can recover 500 to 600, it will be good. Madam Chair, paragraph 7. Understand that you are going to set up a network of 5 to 6 recycling plants for the food waste. That's a long-term target. Other than reduction of food waste, what about your targets for the recycling plants? Are you going to ask the post holder to promote the implementation of the network of recycling plants? Yes, indeed. From his job duties, you can see that he's supposed to manage phase 1, manage the implementation phase 2 as well as phase 3. He has to find suitable sites for the development of the 4th, the 5th recycling plants in the network. Next, Mr. Kwong. Now, we understand that we have got the big waster in the Food-Wise campaign. The public are educated not to generate food waste. Yes, we do see a drop in the food waste, but I'm afraid it is not yet up to what we have been striving for. Day in, day out, we're still having 3,000 tons of food waste. In other words, it is good enough to fill 250 double-decker buses, and yet all the food waste is going to the landfill. So for the creation of this post, I want to know whether you're going to have a timetable to reduce food waste across the board. It will be important to get a timetable. Well, many non-government organizations are doing it, and they even go to the wet markets to collect vegetables and fruits, and then they will have it sorted and have them given out to the needy families. But they can only achieve limited results. Now, for the post, when it is created, will the department give us a timetable so that we can expect what will be achieved in the coming years? And can you also learn from the work done at the district level? Ms. Kwok. Thank you, Mr. Kwong. Well, indeed, we attach a lot of importance to the overall food waste reduction. We do have a strategy. In 2014, we have issued the food waste plan, and we have also suggested a target. We have the food wise campaign, we have the waste to energy program, etc. We hope that by 2022, food waste going to landfill will be reduced by 40%. As Mr. Au, the AD, has pointed out, as far as the food wise campaign is concerned, we would like to reduce food waste by 5 to 10%. Well, basically, we are able to meet the target. But of course, we won't be complacent. We'll continue to work hard, and we will continue to work on food waste management. And this is exactly what the PPO will have to do as a very important part of his work. Now, well, with phases 1, 2, and 3 of the OBTFs coming into place, we are sure that there will be a significant fall in food waste. We will have other support measures. Very soon we'll come to the LegCo to brief you on the legislative work on the MSW charging scheme. It will be a landmark achievement, and it can go a long way towards waste reduction. With that in place, then we are able to assist in a significant drop in food waste disposal. Well, all around the world, we have got new and innovative measures to deal with food waste. In the UK, we're told that come next year, they will have a facility to turn food waste into power. There is energy, there is electricity. Are you going to explore along this line, other than just having what you have told us? Are you going to come up with something innovative, and do you have any targets for them? Well, for the food waste management group, we have got the food waste plan, and there are 4 strategies. And as the Secretary for the Environment has said, we're going to consider other strategies. In the long term, for the management group under the leadership of the post holder, will be following the latest developments all over the world. We'll make sure that we are conversant with the latest developments and see if they are practicable in Hong Kong. So we'll be watching the latest development all over the world. Of course, they will be developing new policies. Say, for example, mandatory source separation of food waste, or a ban of food waste at landfills. I think for such policies in the long term, we need to see whether they are applicable in Hong Kong. Thank you. Next, Mr. Paul Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. 2 groups of questions. First of all, the current arrangements. The second group of questions is more or less what Dr. Low has said. There's the supernumerary post vis-a-vis permanent post. First group of questions. The plan has come into place in 2014, and I understand that you have redeployed the PUPO from the cross-boundary and international division to take over the job.
Well, I'm referring to enclosure 3, the PPO was originally responsible for the conventions and the Stockholm Convention, and also cross-boundary environmental issues. I want to know whether he will be up to his task, because we have seen a more serious cross-boundary pollution problem recently. So I want to know, after his redeployment, whether the department will continue to work on that, or whether another officer will be deployed to that post to tackle cross-boundary pollution. Well, coming back to the figures, in 2014 the figure dropped by 7.1%. In 2015, in terms of food waste disposal, and that's quite impressive. And yet, when I read Enclosure 1 about main duties and responsibilities, it seems rather long-term. Apart from the organic waste treatment facilities Phase 1, he will also be responsible for Phase 2, Phase 3, and also the food waste and yard waste plan all the way to 2022, and Foodwise Hong Kong campaign, etc. So all his tasks could be rather long-term. Apart from this supernumerary time-limited post, I wonder if you will do anything else, because you have these long-term initiatives. So you should consider the merits of these long-term initiatives to be dealt with by a time-limited post. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your questions. Well, as a matter of expedience, indeed, we deployed this PEPO from the CBD, the cross-boundary division, to take up the task. The officer also has a major role to play in the Stockholm Convention, and also other international conventions. And he's also responsible for overseeing local legislation to see if we should amend the legislation to align our laws with the international laws. And he also provides secretarial support to the Guangdong-Hong Kong Joint Working Group on Sustainable Development and Environmental Protection. Without this PEPO, the work in this regard will be delegated to other colleagues in this team, but they'll continue to work on various issues. As the work will be taken up by other colleagues.
We are all very concerned about our policies concerning climate change, and then for the Paris agreement, it has come into place and it will be applicable to Hong Kong.
And we are also going to submit our plan on combating climate change. So one major task for this PEPO after returning to CBD is to coordinate among government bureaus and departments. So he will be taking up some major task, and this EPD officer would be returning to the CBD to take up the work I mentioned, and that's our present arrangement. As I mentioned just now, in 2014, the Food Waste Management Group was set up because it was imminent to tackle food waste. And now we're considering this colleague, and we also considered that it should be a supernumerary post. Our consideration was that the Food Waste Management Group's work may be changed in the future, subject to our future policies. So on the staff deployment of the Food Waste Management Group, a review may be necessary to meet our future work demand. So like I said just now, if there is a need for manpower, we will strive for more resources to create, say, permanent posts and other posts to support our work on food waste management. Thank you. Mr. Leung Chi-Chang. Thank you, Madam Chair. The target on food waste reduction is set by 2022. Food waste disposal at landfills should be reduced by 40%, and I agree with Dr. Loy Kwok. Since these are rather long-term goals, why would you create a time-limited supernumerary post which will expire in 2019? And in your suggested goals, you have other phases of the facilities, one in North District, another in Shek Kong, which are yet to be completed. And you're relying on this time-limited post to fulfill these goals. That is the Principal Environmental Protection Officer. And apart from this post, there would be other posts created underneath him. Does it mean that you are going to come back to us again in the future? Well, I thank members for your support. And indeed, we need manpower in the long term to support our work. In fact, for the Food Waste Management Group, we have a team of staff. As mentioned in the paper, we have deployed existing manpower, such as non-directorate posts, permanent posts, and time-limited posts to the group, and we've gone through the necessary procedures to create the posts. As for the directorate post that we are talking about, I would like to seek member support and the ESC's recommendation for the post to be created. So, are you suggesting that you have the staff deployment ready, save and except this PEPO, which is this new group on food waste reduction? I'd like to pick up on the point mentioned by Dr. Low Wai Kwok. Why not turn it into a permanent post? Because you have permanent posts for other tasks, but not this one. Are you concerned that these 3 organic waste treatment facilities would be folded up? Well, in fact, this is a long-term goal, and this is a sustained effort. But having considered the members' suggestions, having heard members' suggestions, we'll go back and consider actively, upon expiry of the time-limited supernumerary post, apply for a permanent post to be created. 12 members have asked their questions. Are there any other questions? If not, I put this item to a vote. With those in favor of EC 2016-17-19, please raise your hands. Everybody. Any separate voting claimed? No? First, I think that this proposal has 1 majority support, so proposal endorsed. Any separate voting requested? No? Thank you. Date of the next meeting will be subject to notice by the Secretariat. What items do we have? What is the tentative date? It's tentatively 14th of December, 8:30 a.m. And we'll wait for the administration to inform us of the their proposals. Thank you.